Hello students, today I'm here with yet another interesting story from your supplementary reader, Footprints Without Feet. The story which I'm going to take up today is entitled The Hack Driver, and it is written by Sinclair Lewis. So, before we proceed to the story, The Hack Driver, let us know something about the writer of this particular story. So, Harry Sinclair Lewis was an American novelist, short story writer, and playwright. In the year 1930, he became the first writer from the United States to receive the Nobel Prize in Literature. His works were noted for their range of interesting characters and especially strong modern working women characters. Some of his best known works include It Can't Happen Here, Main Street, Babbitt, etc. So my dear students, this is all about a brief introduction to the writer of our story today, The Hack Driver. So with this introduction, let us now move on to the story, The Hack Driver, written by Sinclair Lewis. Alright. Dear students, the story The Hack Driver revolves around a young lawyer who comes to a village to serve summons on Oliver Lutkins. A friendly hack driver takes him round the village in search of Lutkins. Does he find him? Who is Lutkins? So we'll all try to figure out the answers of these questions as and when we read the story. Alright? At the same time, let me also tell all of you that the story The Hack Driver is written from the point of view of the first person. So here it is the first person account of the narrator's own experience. Alright. Now let us begin with the text of the story, The Hack Driver. Alright. After graduating with honors, I became a junior assistant clerk in a magnificent law firm. I was sent not to prepare legal briefs, but to serve summons like a cheap private detective. So the narrator of the story gives an introduction here that after having completed his graduations with honors, he got the job of a junior assistant clerk in a magnificent or a huge law firm. So we have got to know about the narrator's profession or his job, that of a junior assistant clerk, and where exactly? In a magnificent or in a very famous and huge law firm. I was sent not to prepare legal briefs but to serve summons. So here the narrator means to say that as part of his job, he was sent not to prepare any kinds of legal briefs. The word legal briefs means in this context legal papers or documents. So since the narrator of the story was simply an assistant clerk, that is why he was not supposed to prepare legal papers or documents. Rather, his job involved serving summons or to deliver court orders to the various people. That is why he felt that his job was just like a cheap private detective. Alright, now the narrator of the story here reveals that as part of his job, he was not supposed to prepare legal papers, but rather his job involved serving summons or court orders to the various people. I had to go to dirty and shadowy corners of the city to seek out my victims. So here the narrator reveals that as part of his job, he had to go to some of the dirty and shadowy corners of the city. The word shadowy here means dark. So at times he had to go to dirty and dark corners of the city in an effort to seek out or to look out for his victims. Alright? Some of the larger and more self-confident ones even beat me up. And among all those people on whom the court orders had been delivered, some of those people literally had beaten up the narrator. So the narrator here admits that at times he had to face very unpleasant and awkward situations when the people did not like the fact that they were served summons, and that is why literally they had beaten up the narrator, because the narrator was the one who was responsible for delivering the court orders to those very people. And out of anger and frustration, those people literally had beaten up the narrator. And so the narrator here admits once again that he hated this unpleasant work and the side of city life it revealed to him. So we have got to see the narrator out here acknowledging, admitting that he simply did not like this sort of unpleasant work, and also the side of city life which it exposed to him. So out here you all need to understand the feeling of disliking, the feeling of hatred which the narrator of the story had developed in his mind. Hatred for what? Hatred for his unpleasant work. Why so? Because it exposed the dark side of the city life, and on top of that, at times he had to face very unpleasant and awkward situations as well. Alright, I even considered fleeing to my hometown, and that is why he even considered running away or escaping to his hometown, where I could have been a real lawyer right away, to his hometown where he could be a lawyer in the real sense of the term, without going through this unpleasant training period and without having to bear all these unpleasant experiences. Alright. So I rejoiced one day when they sent me out 40 miles in the country to a town called New Mullion to serve summons on a man called Oliver Lutkins. The narrator is here expressing his sense of delight when he was sent to the countryside, to a town called New Mullion, in order to serve summons or court orders on a person whose name was Oliver Lutkins. Now, why was the narrator filled with a sense of satisfaction and joy at that particular point of time? It was simply because the narrator had developed a strong disliking for his present job in the city, as the job involved a lot of risk, and at the same time, at times he had to face some unpleasant and awkward situations as well. So all this while when he was working in the city, he simply wanted to escape to his hometown and do the job of a real lawyer, away from all the city life. Alright, so at the prospect of getting the opportunity to go to the countryside and do his job there, the narrator's mind suddenly changed. He felt extremely thrilled and happy about the prospect. Alright, we needed this man as a witness in a law case, and he had ignored all our letters. So the narrator is here saying that they needed Oliver Lutkins as a witness in a particular law case, and Oliver had ignored all their communication through the letters. Alright, so Oliver Lutkins was the person to whom the narrator of the story was to deliver the court orders. Alright, and he was needed as a witness in a particular law case. On top of that, Oliver Lutkins had simply ignored all their communication through the letters. Alright. When I got to New Mullion, my eager expectations of a sweet and simple country village were severely disappointed. As you know, the narrator's mind was filled with a lot of expectations, excitement, and thrill at the prospect of getting to a sweet and simple country village of New Mullion. Little did he know that all his expectations were to prove wrong, because the mental picture of the place New Mullion that he had carried about all this while in his mind was in stark contrast to the reality picture. Alright, its streets were rivers of mud with rows of wooden shops, either painted a sour brown or bare of any paint at all. So the streets of New Mullion were literally rivers of mud. They were full of mud, contrary to the expectations of the narrator. They also had rows of wooden shops, and some of those shops were painted a sour brown, a very dull appearance, while others were devoid of any paint at all. So wherever the narrator looked around, he could only see dull and unpleasant sights. However, now he says, the only agreeable sight about the place was the delivery man at the station. Now the narrator says, the only agreeable sight, which means the only pleasant sight about the place was the delivery man at the station. So, in contrast to all those dull and unpleasant sights which he came across in New Mullion, there was a complete change of sight, and that was the presence of the delivery man at the station. He was about 40, red-faced, cheerful, and thick about the middle. So this particular delivery man was about 40 years of age, alright, and He was red-faced. He looked very cheerful and he was thick about the middle. Now the expression thick about the middle means that he was fat around the waist. Alright. His working clothes were dirty and well worn, and he had a friendly manner. So this delivery man was wearing clothes which looked very dirty and worn out. However, he had a very friendly manner which the narrator liked very much. Alright, in fact, the narrator was now drawn so much so to the presence of this particular delivery man at the station. You felt at once that he liked people. So the narrator came down to the conclusion at once that the delivery man was really someone who liked the company of people. So out here in this particular context of the story, we have got to understand that the narrator had formed a very favorable opinion of the delivery man in his mind. Alright. I told him to find a man named Oliver Lutkins. Now the narrator reveals to this particular delivery man that he really wanted to find a man whose name was Oliver Lutkins. Alright. Lutkins, I saw him around here about an hour ago. So the delivery man now says to the narrator that he had seen Lutkins around there almost about an hour ago. Hard fellow to cat's door, always up to something or other. At the same time, he tells the narrator that Lutkins was really a hard fellow to catch up with, as he was always up to something or other. He is probably trying to start up a poker game in the back of Fritz's shop. Maybe Lutkins is now trying to start up a game of poker, a kind of card game, in the back of Fritz's shop. I'll tell you, boy, is there any hurry about locating Lutkins? And then this delivery man asked a question to the narrator. He wanted to know really if there was any urgency about finding out Lutkins. So here we have seen the delivery man getting so very involved and eager to know about this from the narrator, if there was any urgency about locating Lutkins. Alright, yes, I want to catch the afternoon train back to the city. At this, the narrator replied in the positive by saying yes, that he had really wanted to catch the afternoon train back to the city. So there was an urgency on his part to find out Lutkins. By saying so, I was very important and secret about it. So the narrator says now that he tried to sound very important and secretive about his entire mission of finding out Lutkins. Alright, I'll tell you what, I have got a hack. I'll get it out and we can drive around together and find Lutkins. I know most of the places he hangs out. So at this point of time, the delivery man comes up with a proposal, a suggestion. He says to the narrator that he has got a hack, which means a horse-drawn carriage. I'll get it out and we can drive around together and find Lutkins. So he offers this particular proposal to the narrator that he can definitely get his hack out, and then both of them together find out about Lutkins. Alright, I know most of the places he hangs out. At the same time, the delivery man says to the narrator that he knows about most of the places Oliver Lutkins hangs out. Alright? He was so open and friendly that I glowed with the warmth of his affection. All at once, immediately, the narrator felt a sudden liking towards the delivery man. It is because he was so very open and friendly. The delivery man was genial. He was amiable in his nature. At the same time, he was very open and frank. That is why the narrator was literally impressed by the warmth of his affection. So he says here that he glowed with the warmth of his affection, which means that he was very much fascinated by the warmth of the delivery man's affection. His mannerisms, the way of his talking, his attitude, his friendly gestures, all about this particular delivery man was something really very pleasing, and the narrator felt a sudden liking towards this delivery man. Alright, he was literally impressed by his overall mannerisms and his behavior. Alright, I knew of course that he wanted business. Of course I knew that he wanted his own business, but his kindness was real. At the same time, you have to admit that his kindness, his affection, his large-heartedness was something that was really genuine. I was glad the fair money would go to this good fellow, and the narrator says that he was literally very happy that the fair money would go to this good fellow. I managed to bargain down to $2 an hour, and he had made a bargain with this particular delivery man, and the bargain was all about $2 an hour. And then he brought from his house nearby a sort of large black box on wheels. Alright, so after having struck the bargain with the narrator, this particular delivery man brought from his house his hack, his carriage. Alright, he remarked, "Well, young man, here is the carriage," and his wide smile made me into an old friend. Alright, so he said to the narrator, "Well, young man, look at this, here is the carriage, and we can now search for Oliver Lutkins together." Alright, his wide smile instantly made me into an old friend. These villagers are so ready to help a stranger. So all at once a smile appeared on the face of the delivery man, and it was a wide grin on his face, which literally impressed the narrator very much. He felt almost like an old friend of this particular delivery man. Alright, then he says, "These villagers are so ready to extend a helping hand to a stranger." So here he really liked this particular trait, this nature of the villagers, that they are always ever ready to extend a helping hand to any stranger. Alright, this eagerness, this readiness on the part of the villagers was something that was really liked by the narrator. Alright, he had already made it his own task to find Oliver Lutkins for me. It seemed as if the delivery man had already made it his own responsibility, his own job to find Oliver Lutkins for the narrator. And the narrator is simply left wonderstruck and impressed by his overall mannerisms and his readiness to help him out. He said, "I don't want to interfere, young fellow, but my guess is that you want to collect some money from Lutkins. He never pays anybody a cent." So the delivery man started the conversation with the narrator, and he said that he didn't exactly want to poke his nose into this matter. However, he just simply expressed his assumption that maybe the narrator had come all the way down into the place New Mullion to collect some money from Lutkins, and that Lutkins is one fellow who was into the habit of never paying back his debt. He still owes me 50 cents on a poker game. I was fool enough to play with him. And here the delivery man says that he was really a fool enough because he was being tricked by Lutkins in a game of poker. Alright, and that he still owes him some amount of money. He's not really bad, but it's hard to make him part with his money. It's not that Lutkins is definitely a really bad person, but then it's difficult to make him part with his money. If you try to collect from him in those fancy clothes, he'll be suspicious and get away from you. And now the delivery man says that if at all he tries to collect money from Lutkins in those fancy clothes that he was wearing at the moment, in that case Lutkins will definitely be suspicious. Alright, and then he will get away from the narrator. So at this point of time, the delivery man cautions the narrator that under no circumstance he should appear in front of Lutkins in those fancy clothes that he was wearing, because in that case it will arise doubts and suspicions in the mind of Lutkins, and he will get an opportunity to get away from him. If you want, I'll go into fridges and ask for him, and you can keep out of sight behind me. If you permit, then I will definitely go into Fridge's shop and then ask for Lutkins, and you can keep out of sight behind me. And in that particular case, you can very well keep out of sight behind me. So this was the kind of offer that has been proposed by the delivery man to the narrator. Now, what is the offer exactly? The offer was that he would personally go into Fridge's shop and then ask for Lutkins, and all this while the narrator can very well keep out of sight behind the delivery man. I loved him for this. So the narrator felt really pleased and impressed once again. By myself, I might never have found Lutkins. Maybe on my own account, I could never have been able to find Lutkins. With the hack driver's knowing help, I was sure of getting my man. Alright, so with his due help, maybe I was almost sure of getting my man, that is Oliver Lutkins. So out here we can see the narrator of the story reposing trust and confidence in the delivery man. to the extent that he was now certain of getting his man, that is Oliver Lutkins, with all the due help from the delivery man. Alright. I took him into my confidence and told him that I wanted to serve the summons on Lutkins. So I took him into my confidence. At this point of time, the narrator had taken the delivery man into his confidence and then revealed to him that he wanted to serve the summons on Oliver Lutkins. So in this particular context of the story, we have come to know a very important thing. Alright, the important thing which I refer to is the fact that the narrator of the story had taken the delivery man into his confidence and then revealed him about his entire mission, that he had come down to New Million in order to serve summons on Oliver Lutkins. Alright, that the man had refused to be a witness when his information would have quickly settled our case. The driver listened earnestly. Now when the narrator was revealing about his purpose of visit to New Million, then the driver, that is the delivery man, listened to his words very earnestly, with rapt attention, with a bit of seriousness. Alright. At the end, he hit me on the shoulder and laughed. Well, we will give Brother Lutkins a little surprise. So at the very end, he hit me on the shoulder, that is, the delivery man hit the narrator on the shoulder, and then with a smile he said, well, we'll give Brother Lutkins a little surprise. Alright, let's start, driver. At this, the narrator instructed the delivery man to head off towards the destination. Alright, now the conversation between them continues. Most folks around here call me Bill or Magnuson. My business is called William Magnuson Fancy Carting and Hacking. Alright, so to strike up the conversation with the narrator, the delivery man now goes on to say that most of the people around here call him by the name Bill or Magnuson, and that his business was called William Magnuson Fancy Carting and Hacking. Alright, Bill, shall we proceed to Fridges? Alright, now the narrator said to the delivery man that they should really proceed to Fridges' shop right then. Alright. Yes, Lutkins is just as likely to be there as anywhere. Plays a lot of poker. He's good at deceiving people. Bill seemed to admire Lutkins' talent for dishonesty. Now, Bill expresses here that Lutkins was just as likely to be there at Fridges' shop as anywhere, because he was into the habit of playing a lot of poker game. On top of that, he was very good at deceiving people. Alright, so at this point of time, the delivery man says something important about Oliver Lutkins. Alright, the revelation was that Lutkins was really very good and an expert person at deceiving other people. It almost seemed to the narrator that Bill had an admiration for Lutkins' talent for dishonesty. I felt that if he had been a policeman, he would have caught Lutkins respectfully and jail him with regret. So the narrator felt at this moment that if at all Bill had been a policeman, in that case he would have caught Lutkins respectfully with honor and then jailed him with regret. So Bill led me into Fridges. Have you seen Oliver Lutkins around today? Friend of his looking for him, said Bill cheerily. So now Bill had taken the narrator into Fridges. And then he said, have you seen Oliver Lutkins around today? A friend of his looking for him. He said these words with cheer, alright? So he asked somebody around whether that person had really seen Oliver Lutkins on that particular day. At the same time, he also said that a friend of Oliver Lutkins was really looking for him. Fritz looked at me, hiding behind Bill. He hesitated and then admitted, yes, he was in here a little while ago. Guess he's gone over to Gustav's to get a shave. Now Fritz looked at the narrator, hiding behind Bill. He hesitated and then he admitted by saying, yes, he was in here a little while ago. He revealed that Lutkins was there exactly a little while ago. Probably now he has gone over to Gustav's to get a shave. Well, if he comes in, tell him I'm looking for him. Alright? So, well, if at all he comes in here again, just tell him that I was looking for him. Alright? We drove to Gustav's barber shop. So the next destination for the narrator and Bill was Gustav's barber shop. Again Bill went in first and I lingered at the door. This time also Bill went in first and the narrator kept waiting at the door. He asked not only the Swede but two customers if they had seen Lutkins. So Bill asked not only the Swede, that is the inhabitant of Sweden, but also he had asked two of the customers who were present at the particular barber shop whether they had seen Lutkins or not. The Swede had not. He said angrily, I haven't seen him and don't care to, but if you find him, you can just collect that $35 he owes me. The Swede said that he had not seen Lutkins, and then in an angry tone of voice he said in fact he didn't care to see him or to meet him, but in case Bill finds him out, then he could just collect $35 that Lutkins still owed the Swede. One of the customers thought he had seen Lutkins walking down Main Street, this side of the hotel, and then one of the customers present at Gustav's barber shop thought that he had seen Lutkins walking down the Main Street, this side of the hotel. As we climbed back into the hack, Bill concluded that since Lutkins had exhausted his credit at Gustav's, he had probably gone to Gray's for a shave. So now, as they were back into the hack, Bill concluded that as Lutkins had used up all his credit at Gustav's barber shop, probably this time he had gone to Gray's for a shave. So their next destination would be Gray's barber shop. Let's see what happens out there. At Gray's barber shop, we missed Lutkins by only 5 minutes. Once again, Quite unfortunately, they had missed Lutkins by just 5 minutes at Gray's barber shop. He had just left, probably for the pool room. At the pool room, it appeared that he had just bought a pack of cigarettes and gone out. So they went to the pool room, and even at the pool room also it appeared that Oliver Lutkins had just bought a pack of cigarettes and then he had moved out. So we see destination after destination being explored by Bill as well as the narrator in a frantic search for Oliver Lutkins. However, with little success. Alright, so we pursued him, just behind him, but never catching him. So in spite of all their effort, in spite of all the pursuing Oliver Lutkins, they were never able to catch him up, right? For an hour till it was past 1 o'clock, I was hungry. So the search for Oliver Lutkins continued till it was past 1 o'clock, and by this time the narrator felt really hungry. But I had so enjoyed Bill's rough country opinions about his neighbors that I scarcely cared whether I found Lutkins or not. However, the narrator here reveals something very important. He says, I had so much enjoyed Bill's rough country opinions about his neighbors that I scarcely cared whether I found Lutkins or not. So, whether the narrator is able to find Lutkins or not, that has almost become insignificant or immaterial for the narrator, simply because he had so much enjoyed the company of Bill out here. He was almost drawn in by his jovial and friendly nature. He was almost impressed by his warmth of affection, his kindness and his caring nature. So much so that whether he was able to find Lutkins or not in New Mullion had eventually become a thing of least importance for the narrator. So we have understood from this part of the story that the narrator was very much impressed by the presence of Bill around him, to the extent that now he comes to the conclusion that he hardly cared whether he found Lutkins or not. Alright, see the point. The narrator was simply impressed by Bill's knowledge about his neighbors and his mannerisms, his genial and his friendly nature. Alright. How about something to eat? I suggested. Let's go to a restaurant and I will buy you lunch. So here the narrator comes up with a suggestion that they should go to a restaurant and that he would buy him lunch. Well, I ought to go home to the wife. So at this particular suggestion made by the narrator, Bill simply says that he should go home to the wife. I don't care much for these restaurants, only 4 of them, and they are all bad. He also says that he didn't care much for these restaurants. There are only 4 of them in New Mullion, and they are not at all worth paying a visit. In fact, they are all bad. Tell you what we'll do. We'll get the wife to pack up a lunch for us. And then he comes up with another suggestion to the narrator. Alright? The offer was that they would get the wife of Bill to pack up a lunch for both of them. She won't charge you more than $50. He also says that the wife would definitely charge the narrator not more than just $50, and it would cost you more for a crazy meal in a restaurant. On top of that, it would cost the narrator more for a greasy or oily meal in a restaurant. And we'll go up to Wade's Hill and enjoy the view while we eat. And right after that, we can very well go up to Wade's Hill and then enjoy the view while we have our lunch. Alright, so this was the offer suggested by Bill to the narrator. Alright. I know that Bill's helpfulness to the young fellow from the city was not entirely a matter of brotherly love. I was paying him for his time. In the end, I paid him for 6 hours, including the lunch hour, at what was then a very high price. So here the narrator says that Bill's helpfulness to him was not just about his genuine concern and helpful nature. In fact, at the end of the day, it was all about money, right? So he was paying Bill for the time that he was devoting to the narrator. In the end, the narrator had paid him for 6 hours, including the lunch hour, at what was then a very high price. But he was no more dishonest than I. I charged the whole thing to the firm. So eventually the narrator had charged the whole thing to a law firm under which he was working, and while doing so, he says that he was no more dishonest than he himself. Alright, but it would have been worth paying him myself to have his presence. However, the narrator once again comments upon the kind of admiration that he has felt for Bill. Alright, he says that it would have been worth paying Bill himself to have his presence. So he was so much full of admiration for Bill that he says that it would have been worth paying a person like Bill on his own account. Alright, his cheerful country wisdom was very refreshing to a country boy like myself who was sick of the city. So Bill's cheerful country wisdom, his enlightenment, his knowledge about the village and its people was so very pleasing and refreshing to a country boy like the narrator himself, who was literally sick of the city life. That is why maybe he felt more and more drawn towards and moved by the presence of Bill around him. Alright, as we sat on the hilltop looking over the pastures and creek which slipped among the trees, he talked of New Mullion and painted a picture in words of all the people in it. So as they were sitting on the hilltop looking over the grasslands and the stream which slipped among the trees, Bill talked about the place New Mullion, and then he painted a vivid picture of all the people in New Mullion. So out here, Bill is trying to create a very graphic and vivid image of all the people of New Million in the mind of the narrator. Alright, he recounts about the place New Million and about its people also. Alright, he noticed everything, but no matter how much he might laugh at people, he also understood and forgave their foolishness. He noticed everything. So here the narrator means to say that Bill had an acute eye for observation. Alright, he was a very good observer. But no matter how much he would laugh at people, he also understood at the same time and then forgave people because of the foolishness or because of their flaws in nature. Alright? He described the minister's wife who sang the loudest in church when she was most in debt. So one by one here Bill is giving a vivid account of different people from his place New Million. He described the minister's wife who sang the loudest in church whenever she was in debt and was unable to pay money. Alright. He commented on the boys who came back from college in fancy clothes. So Bill also commented upon the boys who came back from college wearing fancy clothes. He told about the lawyer whose wife could never succeed in getting him to put on both a collar and a tie on the same day. So Bill also went on to tell about the lawyer whose wife was never successful in getting him to put on both a collar and a tie on the same day. So he made them all live. This means that he brought these very characters alive in the imagination of the narrator. So the way Bill had vividly described about different people to the narrator, it almost seemed that all those characters were alive in front of his eyes. Alright, so on that day, I came to know New Million better than I did the city and to love it better. So here the narrator comes to the conclusion that on that particular day he had come to know New Million, the place, better than he had done the city, and also to love it better at the same time. Bill didn't know about colleges and cities, but he had traveled around a lot of the country and had had a lot of jobs. So Bill certainly didn't know about colleges and cities, but then he had traveled around a lot of the countryside and had held a number of jobs. So what the narrator means by this is that Bill might be someone who is not exposed to the city life. However, he has widely traveled the countryside, and in fact he knows a lot of things about the countryside. On top of that, he had also been into a number of odd jobs. So this means that Bill is a widely traveled person as far as the countryside is concerned. This only amounted to his vast knowledge and understanding of the countryside and its people. From his adventures, he had brought back a philosophy of simplicity and laughter. So from all his adventures, experiences, explorations and exploits, Bill had simply enriched his life with a philosophy, with an ideology that is characterized by traits of simplicity and laughter. So you try to understand my point, alright? Bill's nature of simplicity and genuine behavior owes a lot to the diverse experiences that he has gathered in his life throughout being in the countryside. Alright? So no doubt that he is someone who has not been into college, or maybe who is not exposed to the city life, but then Bill certainly knows a lot of things about the countryside and its people as well. So that simply makes Bill a really knowledgeable and wise human being. Alright, so at the end of this paragraph, the narrator says, "He strengthened me." This means that Bill only strengthened my trust, my faith on him. Alright, since Bill turns out to be someone who is quite an experienced person when it comes to the countryside, that is why the narrator comes to the conclusion that by being in the company of someone like Bill simply reassured him. It simply strengthened his faith, the trust that he had reposed on Bill so far. And now he feels certain that in the company of Bill and with his due help and support, he would certainly be able to look out for Oliver Lutkins. So this is a kind of belief that has been rebuilt in the narrator. Alright. We left that peaceful scene of meadows and woods. So finally they departed from that peaceful scene of countryside and resumed our search of Oliver Lutkins, and then they continued their search of Oliver Lutkins. We could not find him. Unfortunately, they could not find him again. At last, Bill cornered a friend of Lutkins and made him admit what he guessed. Finally, Bill spotted a friend of Lutkins, and then he simply made him admit what he had guessed about Oliver Lutkins. So he said, "Oliver has gone out to his mother's farm 3 miles north." So this friend of Lutkins confessed that Oliver had gone out to his mother's farm, which was 3 miles north. We drove out there, laying plans. So hearing this revelation from a friend of Lutkins, the narrator as well as Bill now drove out to another destination for finding out the ever elusive persona, that is Oliver Lutkins. So we'll see what happens in the next part of the story. Alright? "I know Oliver's mother. She is a terror," Bill sighed. So Bill here admits having known Oliver Lutkins' mother, who is a real terror. So Bill here recounts an experience, an unpleasant experience he has had with regard to Oliver's mother. So what is that unpleasant experience? "I took a trunk out there for her once, and she almost took my skin off because I didn't treat it like a box of eggs." So once upon a time, Bill had taken a trunk for Oliver's mother, and Oliver's mother, being an ill-tempered woman, did not like the way Bill was handling that particular trunk. According to her, Bill should have taken care of the trunk just like a box of eggs. So at this, she got very annoyed and irritated. She is about 9 feet tall and 4 feet thick, and quick as a cat, and she sure can talk. So here Bill is giving a little bit of physical descriptions of Oliver's mother, stating that she is about 9 feet tall and 4 feet thick. At the same time, she is as quick and agile, just like a cat. And of course, she can talk. I will bet Oliver heard that somebody is chasing him, and he has gone on there to hide behind his mother's skirts. So Bill here says that he is quite certain that Oliver had come to know that someone was really after him, and that is why he has gone to his house to hide behind his mother. Well, we'll try her. Here Bill assures the narrator that of course we're going to try her out. But you'd better let me do it, boy. But once again, let me handle the situation. Alright? You may be great at literature and law, but you haven't had real training in swearing. Of course, you may be great at literature and law. That means you may be very good in the fields of literature and law, but then you don't have any real experience of putting up with people's verbal abuses. So here the word swearing refers to all the kinds of offensive language that could very well be used by Oliver's mother. And now Bill reassures the narrator by saying that you don't have to worry about all this when it comes to Oliver's mother and her ill-tempered nature, because I'm here for you and I will deal with her on my own account, because you don't have any real experience of enduring any such kinds of abuses in your life. Alright. We drove into a poor farmyard. We were faced by an enormous and cheerful old woman. So Bill and the narrator drove into a poor farmyard looking for Oliver Lutkins. This time, their destination being the very house where Oliver Lutkins resides, along with his mother. So they faced an enormous and cheerful old woman who happens to be Oliver's mother. My guide bravely went up to her, and then he said, "Remember me? I'm Bill Magnuson, the carter and hackman. I want to find your son, Oliver." So Bill went up to the old woman with courage, and then he introduced himself by saying he was Bill Magnuson, the carter and hackman. At the same time, he also stated the very purpose of their visit, it being the fact that they simply wanted to find her son, Oliver. So let us see how Oliver's mother responds to this very revelation. "I don't know anything about Oliver, and I don't want to," she shouted. So Oliver's mother, being an ill-tempered woman, simply shouted by saying that she didn't know anything about her son Oliver, and neither she wanted to know about it. Now look here, we have had just about enough nonsense. This young man represents the court in the city, and we have a legal right to search all properties for this Oliver Lutkins. So at this point of time, Bill simply conveyed the message to Oliver's mother that the narrator had come from the city and he represents the court, and they do have a legal right to search all the properties for Oliver Lutkins. Alright, so when Oliver's mother simply denied and said that she didn't know anything about Oliver, at this point of time, Bill had to make her understand the point that this gentleman had come all the way from the city and he has come there for a certain reason, and that on top of it they do have a legal right to search for all the properties for Oliver Lutkins. Bill made me sound very important and the woman was impressed. So by saying so, actually Bill made the narrator sound very important. So when Bill talked about the court matters, alright, then it really impressed the narrator. At the same time, the woman was also impressed. The woman also seemed to be equally impressed because she retired into the kitchen and we followed. She went inside the kitchen and then both Bill and the narrator followed her. She seized an iron from the old-fashioned stove and marched on us, shouting. So the old woman went into the kitchen and then she grabbed an iron rod from the old-fashioned stove and then she marched on both of them, shouting like this: "You search all you want to if you don't mind getting burned first." She shouted and laughed at our frightened retreat. So the old woman simply picked up an iron rod from the old-fashioned stove and then she marched on the narrator and Bill, shouting that they could very well search anything they wanted to, but in case they don't mind getting burned first. So she shouted and then simply laughed at our frightened retreat. So the narrator and Bill were left out with no other choice than making a hasty retreat from that particular scene, because literally they were very scared and they had no other option than to step back. Alright, and at this particular point of time, Oliver's mother kept on shouting and even she laughed at their retreat. "Let's get out of here, she'll murder us," Bill whispered. Bill then whispered in the ears of the narrator that they should really get out of that particular place, otherwise she is going to kill both of them. Outside, he said, "Did you see her smile? She was laughing at us." So outside he spoke and then he said whether the narrator had really seen her smile. In fact, she was laughing at both of them. Alright. I agreed that it was pretty disrespectful treatment. The narrator concludes that Oliver's mother really turned out to be a horrible and cranky as a woman, and that it was pretty disrespectful treatment which they had received from her. We did, however, search the house. Nevertheless, they could very well search the house. Since it was only 1 story high, Bill went round it, peering in at all the windows. Since the house had just 1 story, that is why Bill could very well go round it peering in, which means to closely look at something. So Bill peered in at all the windows. We examined the barn and stable. They could even examine the storehouse and the stable. We were reasonably certain that Lutkins was not there. So after having a thorough search, they came to the conclusion that finally Lutkins was not to be found there. It was nearly time for me to catch the afternoon train. So finally the time has arrived for the narrator to depart and to catch his afternoon train. Bill drove me to the station. So it was Bill once again who drove the narrator to the station. Alright, so now the narrator had to depart from New Million. Alright, as he would be going by the train, leaving the entire mission of him of finding out Oliver Lutkins to a complete halt. Now what is going to happen with regard to his mission? Let us try to read and find it out. Alright. On the way to the city, I worried very little over my failure to find Lutkins. So the narrator was on his way to the city, and he was hardly concerned and worried over his dismal failure to find Lutkins. This means that, no doubt, the narrator met with severe disappointment when it comes to tracing Lutkins. However, this literally did not bother him at all. So, the narrator did not regret his failure, his unsuccessful mission of finding Lutkins. Why so? It is because I was too busy thinking about Bill Magnuson. So the definite reason behind this was that the narrator's mind was preoccupied with thoughts about Bill Magnuson. Really, I considered returning to New Mullion to practice law. So you can see the entire place of New Mullion and its wonderful fraternity of people had simply cast a magical spell on the narrator, to the extent that he is even considering about returning to the place and then practice law. If I had found Bill so deep and richly human, might I not grow to love Fritz and Gustav and 100 other slow-spoken, simple, wise neighbors? So now the narrator is wondering about this. If at all he had found Bill Magnuson to be so deep and richly human, in that case he would definitely grow to love Fritz and Gustav and 100 other people of New Mullion. Alright, so what do you mean by the sentence? Let us try to understand it better. Here the narrator says, first of all, that he has found Bill so deep and richly human. So here is a kind of admittance on the part of the narrator that in Bill Magnuson he had really found a wonderful personality. Alright, so Bill Magnuson appears in front of the narrator to be a person who is endowed with so many admirable and enduring qualities. In fact, he goes on to the extent of commenting upon the character and personality of Bill Magnuson, saying that he was richly human. Alright, so if at all he had found Bill Magnuson to be someone who possessed all such enviable qualities in him, in that case he would definitely find love warmth and affection in all the rest of the people of New Malian. So the narrator was of a firm conviction and belief that a day would definitely come when he would love all the rest of the people of New Malian. People who are essentially good at heart. People who are known for the simple ways of living. Alright? I pictured an honest and happy life beyond the strict limits of universities and law firms. So the narrator envisioned, or he had picturized about, a very happy, fulfilling and contented life beyond the strict limitations of the universities and law firms. I was excited, and this particular sudden thought had really made the narrator feel excited and thrilled about it. Alright? I had found a treasure. Now he comments that he had really found a treasure in the place New Malian and in its wonderful fraternity of so many people who are known for their simple and understanding nature. Alright, so the narrator comments upon saying that he had really found a rich treasure in the place New Malian. By treasure, he not only means the place New Malian, but then he also refers to all the wonderful people that he had come across there. Alright, I had discovered a new way of life. Now, he finally ends by saying that he had discovered a new way of life. So, here is the narrator's new perspective towards life when he says that he had literally discovered a new purpose, a new direction in his life. So maybe the narrator is already thinking about settling down in this simple place of New Malian. He is in complete awe of the place and its people, and that is why he comments that he had really discovered a rich treasure. And now this is a new beginning, a new way of life for the narrator. Alright. But if I did not think much about Lutkins, the office did. So here we got to know that if at all the narrator did not think much about Oliver Lutkins and his unsuccessful mission of finding Lutkins, then certainly the office did think about it. Alright, I found them all upset, so much to his disappointment, and obviously he had found everybody in the office to be literally very upset. Next morning, the case was coming up in the court and they had to have Lutkins. The very next morning, it was the time of the case in the court and Lutkins' presence was very much important for the case. I was a shameful, useless fool. So the narrator was considered to be a disgraceful and useless fellow because of his dismal failure in his mission of finding Oliver Lutkins. That morning, my promising legal career almost came to an end before it had begun. So because of all this reason, on that particular morning, his promising legal career almost came to an end before it could begin literally. Alright? The chief almost murdered me. You know, the chief of the law firm was red with rage and it was almost like he was going to murder the narrator in his rage. He hinted that I might do well at digging ditches. So the chief even commented, he even criticized the narrator by saying that he could do well at some odd jobs like digging ditches. I was ordered back to New Merlion, and with me went a man who had worked with Lutkins. So this time the narrator was once again ordered back to the place New Merlion, and with him went another person who had previously worked with Oliver Lutkins. I was rather sorry. The narrator was a little bit disheartened. He was disappointed because it would prevent my loafing all over again with Bill. So why was the narrator filled with disappointment? The narrator was disappointed because this time, since he was to accompany another person along with him, alright, to the place New Merlion, that is why this particular time he would not be getting any opportunity, any chance to spend all his idle time with Bill Magnuson. And that is why this very realization brought a sense of despair and disappointment to the narrator. Alright. When the train arrived at New Merlion, Bill was on the station platform near his cart. So, when the train had arrived at the destination of New Merlion, the narrator could see that Bill was already on the station platform near his cart. Strangely enough, that old tigress, Lutkins' mother, was there talking and laughing with Bill, not quarreling at all. However, strangely enough for the narrator, that old tigress, that is Lutkins' mother, was there along with Bill, and she was simply talking and laughing with Bill, not at all in a quarreling mood. This really surprised the narrator to no end. From the train steps, I pointed Bill out to my companion and said, "There is a fine fellow, a real man. I spent the day with him." So, right from the train steps, the narrator pointed Bill out to his companion, and then he said with admiration in his voice, "There is a fine gentleman, a real gem of a person." So here he is in all praise for Bill, and even he says that Bill is in fact a wonderful person to be with, in whose company I had spent the entire day in New Merlion. Alright, now let us see what happens next in the story. He helped you hunt for Oliver Lutkins. So at this point of time, the companion of the narrator grew curious about Bill, and then he asked the narrator whether Bill was the person who had really helped him in his hunting mission of Oliver Lutkins. And then the narrator admitted by saying, yes, he helped me a lot. So he simply admitted, saying that it was Bill himself who had helped me a lot in my hunting expedition of Oliver Lutkins. Now the companion ends up saying, he must have his Lutkins himself. You know what? He must have helped you in your hunt for Oliver Lutkins, because there's no surprise about it. He is in fact Lutkins himself. So there comes a great revelation, a moment of utter surprise and shock for the narrator as well as to all of us as being readers. Alright, now the surprise that was in store for the narrator all this while was that the person whom he had considered to be Bill all this while indeed eventually turned out to be that one person whom he had been searching for frantically, right? So the real identity of Bill here emerges, and he is none other than Oliver Lutkins, whom the narrator of our story had been searching for all this while. Alright, and this really came as a big surprise. In fact, it was just like a bolt from the blue on the part of the narrator to come to know about this particular revelation. Alright, what really hurt me was that when I served the summons, Lutkins and his mother laughed at me as though I were a bright boy of 7. So no doubt that the narrator was already in a moment of shock. He was rooted to the spot, and then it almost took him time to come back to his senses, and he was already reeling under his moment of shock. And you all try to imagine his pathetic condition at this particular point of time, when the entire identity of Oliver Lutkins just unfolded in front of his eyes. Alright, the same person whom he had trusted so much, the same person who had appeared to be a wonderful personality to be with, had really deceived the narrator in the long run. So it was too terrible a shock for the narrator to come to terms with. However, he now says what really hurt his sentiments was that when he was exactly serving the summons to Oliver Lutkins, at that point of time, Lutkins and his mother had a hearty laugh at the pathetic condition of the narrator. So they were really pitying on his situation at this point of time, as if the narrator was a bright boy of hardly 7 years old. So you try to understand this point right now. The reality, the very revelation of truth hit the narrator hard, and he was really mortified. He felt very humiliated and embarrassed in front of everyone out there. Alright, now with loving kindness, they begged me to go with them to a neighbor's house for a cup of coffee. However, forgetting all this bitterness, all this a big surprise that was in store for the narrator, now Lutkins and his mother, with loving kindness, with a friendly gesture, pleaded the narrator to go with them to a neighbor's house just for a cup of coffee. I told them about you, and they're anxious to look at you, said Lutkins joyfully. Now Lutkins said this with delight to the narrator, that he had already told his neighbors about the narrator, and they were really anxious and eager to have a look at him, because they are about the only folks in the town that missed seeing you yesterday. You know what? The neighbors were about the only people in the small town of New Mullion who had missed the opportunity of seeing you yesterday. Alright? And then with a smile on his face, Lutkins said this to the narrator about his neighbors who had missed the chance of meeting the narrator yesterday. Alright? And then the story ends here. So, my dear students, how do you like this ending of the story, The Hack Driver? Did you at all, at any point of time throughout the story, anticipate that this story would take such a dramatic turn in the end? If yes, then what were the different points in the story which had really made you believe so? Or if not, then we have no other option than just to appreciate the master storyteller over here, alright, for keeping the readers intrigued all throughout his story. Alright, now let me discuss something about the character of Oliver Lutkins. So how would you describe the personality and the character of Oliver Lutkins? First of all, let me draw your attention to the point that Oliver Lutkins indeed appears to be a mysterious character eventually, right? It is so because he had been able to deceive the narrator of the story into believing that he was not exactly Oliver Lutkins, but rather he was Bill Magnuson. And the narrator, being such a simple and gullible human being, could not really just believe otherwise. In fact, Oliver Lutkins made it so very realistic in front of the narrator that the narrator had no other option than just to take Oliver Lutkins or Bill Magnuson into his confidence. Alright, so out here the character of Oliver Lutkins emerges in front of the readers as being quite enigmatic, and you cannot just help rather than appreciate his master execution of the character and the persona of Bill Magnuson, right? No doubt you all have to admit, in fact, I also have to acknowledge at the same time that Oliver Lutkins was, in the real sense of the term, a trickster. He was just like a typical conman, right? He played a prank on the narrator of our story and made him believe in whatever he had said about Oliver Lutkins. So all this while, when the narrator was roaming around New Million in search of Oliver Lutkins, little did he know that the person whom he was exactly looking for was just by his side. So at one particular level, we all have to just think that the narrator of the story was indeed gullible and a simple human being, someone who easily took people into his confidence. At another level, it also evokes our sense of pity and sympathy on the poor narrator over here. However, it is none other than Oliver Lutkins himself who manages to win our heart eventually, simply because he was the one who had been able to deceive the narrator of the story. Of course, you might even say that he meant no harm to the narrator. In fact, you were right here. However, the way he had executed, the way he had carried about the entire task of taking the narrator into his confidence and making him just believe that he was none other than Bill Magnuson, you just have to salute his personality and his superb skill over here. So finally, I would just like to add on that this story entitled The Hack Driver is indeed an intriguing story because of the character of Oliver Lutkins, who appears to be a wonderful person to be with. and at the same time he is also someone who is very enduring, a likable character, and in spite of all his lightheartedness and his friendly nature, or even to the extent to which he just exploits or he takes advantage of the narrator's gullible nature, you cannot help but simply appreciate his beautiful depiction of the character of Bill Magnuson. Alright, so you always tend to believe that the way he was playing the character of Bill Magnuson, it was really Bill and not Oliver Lutkins. So over here we find a character who is so very relatable and who is so very much likable, so we cannot help but feel a wonderful sensation when we come across the character of Oliver Lutkins. Over and above all this, we also have to remember that the story finally highlights the fact that appearances are sometimes deceptive. Alright, so this is what I have to convey to all of you regarding this amusing story, The Hack Driver. I hope that all of you had really enjoyed and had a good time in understanding and appreciating this beautiful story. Thank you.